time to talk rugby. Alan Quinlan, good morning to you.
Morning, lads. How are you? Good.
We'll get into the All Blacks in just a minute, but it's important, I think, that we start the chat with major events of the week. Obviously, the IRFU and the fallout ahead of the timing of it is a little bit off the charts, obviously, with the test for the team tonight. But Anthony Eddy, Quinny, I'm sure you followed events. He's apologised to the players for his comments during the week. Reports that the IRFU Performance Director, David Nusafora, called Cliona Maloney during the week, the Irish hooker, to take her to task over airing her views on the matter on Twitter. None of that's been confirmed, but they're the reports that are out there from scrumqueens.com. And at best, it feels like a pretty shocking failure on Nusafora and Eddie's part to read the room, Quinny. And at worst, maybe the bubbling up again of a lack of commitment to the women's game. I think there's a lot of people maybe feeling that way this week. We've seen things obviously like the facilities fandango last month and the criticism of no 15s contracts. At the end of the week, what's your view on the whole thing?
It's a bit of a mess. It's not ideal preparation for the women when they ahead of that game tonight. It's a very strange one, I think, because I don't know why there was a need for a media briefing. And you mentioned read the room and understand the kind of mood of where the women's game is at the moment. He obviously wasn't sensitive to the way things are. But on the other hand, and I've said this before, and it's kind of dangerous territory for me saying it, the team that failed to qualify for the World Cup, I think they would have got a lot of support and they would have got a lot of resources for their qualification. I think he just got everything pretty much wrong this week in laying the blame totally on the players for their failure to qualify.
Is that the nub of it, Quinny? Just because on that point about the resources and the performance of the team, I'm sure that most of the players wouldn't dispute that they had a major part.
One thing I'd ask you, Adrian, and I can't, and I'm trying to be balanced here. Nobody has come out and said where the failings are for the IRFU. So none of the women have come out and said, well, we should have got this, and this. We understand, and I understand that the All-Ireland League and the resources around the game need to improve. And maybe that's what Anthony Eddy should have come out and said, that we need to improve things at grassroots level, and here's some tangible kind of supports that we're going to put in place. We're still waiting on the review. But I don't know. You tell me. Have you seen any of I haven't seen any of the players give specifics about what's neaded and what the failings have been.
Yeah, my view on it is that I think that the upset on behalf of the players this week,
it's the timing and it's the mood of
absolutely
it. Absolutely
100% to do with the timing, not only in terms of the test tonight, but also the fact that the review is ongoing. The time for making public utterances about your own view.
I agree 100%.
And that's not an insignificant thing. Pulling against the women's team is the women's rugby director.
Yes, that was crazy, and it shouldn't have happened. Because when you're in a sensitive, tough situation, they needed some positive messages if he was coming out this week, and it kind of laid a lot of the blame. We can't get away from the fact, Adrian, that the performances were poor, and they've got to take ownership of that themselves, the women. The performances were poor, the mistakes they made. The coach is now gone. Greg McWilliams has been appointed, who's a brilliant appointment. And since he's been appointed, I've spoke to numerous people who know him, and he's a fantastic appointment. So it's really what he said this week. But if it was the men's game and the men were criticised for not making a World Cup, would it be different? I think the women obviously need some positive messages. They need some support. They need some reassurance that they're going to be helped more, and that things are going to be improved. But they did get very well supported, and what he said in that is very true. They were very well prepared and well supported. I think we go back to the Interpros situation. That was a mistake. All those Interpros should have been pushed back a few weeks previously, and the national players should have been playing in them to get game time. They were undercooked as regards game preparation. But the mood is totally, the mood in the camp this week. It needed to be positive messages, and in a way that if he's saying that, look, it is, the way he kind of put it was totally down to the women and their lack of performance and their failings, which was totally wrong, because it is a very sensitive situation at the moment, and I'm not sure there was a need to even have a press briefing this week. Wait for the report to come out, dissect that, do it in conjunction with some of the senior players, get them involved. I've been involved in some of those reviews before, whether it be at provincial level or national level, and they need to have a voice as well. But like I said, I can't read anywhere where anybody's saying, what are the failings? Here's
but I don't think it's the time for that. I don't think it's the time for it.
No, it's not. And there will be a time for that.
And I do think that I do think that the players will agree wholeheartedly with you that they, of course, have to put their hand up.
Catherine Dane did say that this week. Like, she has been on the record and said that it's a bit of a cop-out, that we're not taking enough accountability. She said, behind closed doors as players, we've done our debrief, we've acknowledged our mistakes, and we're really keen to take responsibility. And then she goes on to say we were at the wheel in Italy, and a lot of those mistakes that were made, it was up to us to adapt and change our plans. I guess both of these things can be true, Alan. That, I mean, the RFU could do a hell of a lot more. The players could have played better, and they underperformed in the qualification.
Yeah, there's a balance, and the timing this week on has been wrong. They needed some positive messages and support, but it's created unnecessary tension, and I suppose it would be much better if this stuff was done behind closed doors, and they both came out and spoke about ownership and responsibility and what needs to change. So it's been a bit of a mess, really, and it's it's different. When I said the men would receive the same sort of would get lambasted like they did after the World Cup, there is a difference, because as professional men and professional rugby players, they've been at the coalface for a long time. A lot of these women have just kind of come into the setup in the last couple of years. There's a lot of new caps. They're young girls, so they're not able for that kind of negativity and that stuff. So that's why, of course, with Anthony Eddy, the messages he put out were wrong, and the timing was wrong. I mean, you need to be sensitive.
Can I ask you one very quickly? Just last one on this. You mentioned about the men's team. Would you like to see more? It feels like a lot of the men's commentary around it, and players get asked about it, and they either say, well, I haven't seen very much about that, so I'm not sure, or there's a lot of sort of evasive commentary around it. Like you saw with the men's football team a number of months ago, that eventually they stood up to the plate and said, listen, we're not happy that the women's national team are getting paid less match fees than us. We're drawing a line in the sand, and we're going to help contribute to that. Like, that was a very proactive, tangible outcome. Would as I said, a lot of the commentary from the men's team has tended to be, I wouldn't like to see that happen to my daughter. I haven't seen very much of it. Not a huge amount of it, very tangible support of the women's team. Would you like to see more of that from them?
It's difficult, and I imagine myself as a player being asked these questions. They're trying to be politically correct, because at the end of the day, the RFU are their employers. They're not the women's employers, because they're not full-time professionals. So I think, when you see what's happening in Wales, when the Welsh are contracting their women's players, and if we get to that situation, of course, I'd love to see the players having some sort of contribution or more support towards the women's team. It's a difficult situation, Adrian, and it's kind of hypothetical as well, because they can't come out, and it's hard to understand this, because you've got to be very sensitive as regards the criticism you give, because you've got to put it in perspective, that these are amateur players. The All-Ireland League they play in is not competitive enough right across the board, and they're expected to go out and play for Ireland. And look, France New Zealand, England, they're all at a different level because they're all professionals and they have more resources and more opportunities to train and play full time. So it's a very difficult situation. But yes, it'd be lovely if the men could kind of give more tangible support and realistic support to the women's team, whether that be coaching. I hear a lot of people giving out about the women's game, ex-players, how many of those ex-players go out and coach a women's team in a rugby club? And I would say that to people. The people who jump on the bandwagon here and criticise the IRFU or the women's game, go out to your local club, coach an underage women's team, make a difference that way. Get involved if you want to support the women's game. They do need support, they do need help. Yeah. But there's a lot of people here who are jumping on the bandwagon and I don't see them do anything. I don't even see them give realistic options as to how we can improve the women's game, because it'd be wonderful to improve the women's game. And I want to make the point that, you know, my cousin 15, 20 years ago in Clanwilliam, she was captain of the women's team in the club. It was the best thing ever for the club. They went on and won a trophy. It was celebrated like the men had won a trophy in the club. It was brilliant. They came into the club, they got involved in different committees, they got involved in the support networks in my club in Clanwilliam, and it was absolutely fantastic. So I would love to see, you know, more clubs throughout the country embrace that, and it has to kind of start at grassroots level. There was a mini competition, Ballycollig last week. There was over 200 girls there, 24 teams there from all over the country. We need to see more of that, and that's the stuff maybe that Anthony Eddy should have focused on, saying, look, we want to, as the RFU, we want to try and encourage this and support this more often. But the women themselves have got to take criticism. The RFU have got to take criticism. It isn't one side or the other. The High Performance Centre in Abbottstown is state of the art, and the support networks that are available to all the teams, whether men's or women's, are second to none. So the people who are kind of giving out and jumping on whichever side, the RFU or the women's side here, give tangible reasons or get involved in the game yourself.
It'll play out, I'm sure, and there's a press conference today as well. We'll see what happens there. Let's talk about the All Blacks game tomorrow. The team news obviously was in since we last spoke to you. Jump in wherever you want. Is it Gibson Park? Is that the obvious place, or what are you thinking?
I didn't think there'd be any changes, to be honest, for a number of reasons. One, they played really well together as a unit. We said this last week, that, and even prior to the selection for the Japanese game, you know, people maybe were looking for more experimentation. You've got to try and get some cohesion before you play a team like New Zealand. You just can't go out and put a team together who haven't played. So that's what happened. And I think the team that played last week was that selection was based on who's going to play against the All Blacks as well this weekend. Gibson Park was really good, and Johnny Sexton was good. The ball was on a plate for them. The breakdown was excellent. They were accurate. They were aggressive. Are they going to have the same sort of time and speed of ball this week? Very unlikely. If they do, it'll be fantastic. But you don't get that sort of clean cohesion and speed of ball against New Zealand. You won't get the opportunities. You might get one or two line breaks in the game. You've got to have anticipation and support runners and take your chances if they appear, because it's a tough 80 minutes when you play New Zealand at any stage, at any time. I think Eoin Henderson coming into the second row is something that I kind of thought I kind of thought was horses for courses. I think it's kind of, I think it's an area that we've got to be really competitive. James Ryan and Eoin Henderson now they're coming up against the two best second rows probably in the world, bar Etzebeth maybe, and the Lou De Jager for South Africa, RG Snyman when he's playing, they're right up there, and they've consistently been outstanding. I remember Retallick making his debut in 2012 in New Zealand. I was down there. I did the game for Sky as a commentator, and I just remember seeing the abrasiveness, the footballing ability, the power of this guy. He's an incredible rugby player, and so Henderson has to come in. But I would say he's got to bring an edge. He's got to bring an anger. He's got to bring a real physicality. And sometimes Ian Henderson's a wonderful footballer, and it's kind of like if you poke him or irritate him a little bit, he comes alive and more aggressive. And that's the one criticism I would have had over the years. He's a wonderful footballer, that he needs to be kind of an enforcer, and he needs to get into Retallick and Whitelock's face. Is it harsh and burn? It is, and he's probably paying the price for he being a utility player and being able to play in the back row as well. But having an ability to bring him off the bench as well should be a positive step for Ireland.
Yeah. I saw Ian Foster's comments during the week that it's been much talked about the Irish style. He was saying he's seen evidence of it off the back of the end of the last Six Nations and obviously into the Japan game last week. Is he right about all that? It doesn't strike me as a guy who tends to play very many mind games, that where the evolution is here.
Yeah, I think we did see it towards the end of the Six Nations. I think particularly that England game, Scotland, there was moments, and then they were in a very comfortable position in that Six Nations game, and then Scotland came right back. Things started to unravel. Sexton gets the kick from the touchline to win it. But I think against England, yeah, you saw some stuff coming together. You saw the strike move, obviously, for Keith Earls' try. Sometimes those things don't work. Maybe we'll see something tomorrow. We saw Stockdale's try a few years ago when we beat New Zealand in Dublin. You may have only one or two opportunities in the game to do that, but they have improved, and probably the passes are starting to stick a little bit better. But look, it depends what kind of ball you get, Adrian. If the ball is slowed down and they're not making gain lines tomorrow, you have no option but to kick it, because if you play around and mess around with the ball too much, the pressure and the aggression that they apply it can be very difficult. So it's about executing when the opportunities happen, and they'll take confidence from last week. Well, I think New Zealand did get three intercept tries against Wales. That kind of tells its own story about the danger that they possess. Barrett got two intercepts himself, so they've got to be careful and play in the right areas. But I look at the Chicago game as well back in 2016, and they brought an ambition and a desire to really play and go after New Zealand, attack them, put the ball through the hands, and run onto the ball with aggression, and they caused them all sorts of problems. So I think we scored 5 tries in that game. Will we do something similar tomorrow? It's unlikely. It's going to be a very, very difficult challenge, and probably from last week we have a bit too much optimism, which I'd be very wary of, but there is a template there. South Africa probably should have beaten them, and at the end of September they lost 19-17 in that rugby championship game, and then 2 weeks or the week later they did beat them 31-29. So there's a template there about not giving them time and space to play and really getting stuck into them. It's easier said than done, because sometimes they're hard to stop. But I think the forward pack tomorrow have got to be really aggressive and work as a unit and frustrate New Zealand. A lot of these Irish players have done it before in those 2 games. Will they do it tomorrow? I don't know. It's a difficult one.
You're, in a word, Ireland or New Zealand?
Look, I think New Zealand are favourites. To be honest, part of me doesn't. I just want Ireland to be competitive. I think we probably have peaked in between the last World Cup and if we win tomorrow, will we get excited again? I think there's a lot of good young players. Yeah, and look, we've only beaten them twice, and I think we played them 32 or 33 times, Adrian.
Yeah,
seems like a small number when you think we've been playing them since 1900 or something. But a lot of games didn't go on. Every 10 years we played them back in those days. But I think we have a good chance, and we've the one thing I want to see tomorrow is Ireland just not standing off and kind of containing them. I'd love to see us, if we lose the game, which I think we probably will, just to be really competitive and cause them a few problems. But it's difficult when you play this size. No matter who wears that black jersey, they can be very good.
For a change, I hope you're wrong. Quinny, thanks a million. Good man. Enjoy the game.
Cheers. Thanks, lads.